You can say what you want about Poppy Playtime. And that's the end of the video, let's just end it there. No, seriously, you can say whatever you like about the games, the story, and the way that's handled, but there are just some things the fanbase are never going to fully agree on, and I think that's fine. Some people have some very unpopular opinions, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have a few of my own. Like, let me give you an example. My two favourite villains in the entire franchise are Yarnaby and Boxy Boo. I even made an entire video defending them. That's an opinion that not many people are going to have. It's so weird, isn't it? Boxy is stuck in spin-off hell, and Yarnaby is one of the most underutilized elements of Chapter 4, and yet for different reasons, they're just my favourite too. So I asked all of you, do you have any unpopular opinions? What are your Poppy Playtime hot takes? And my god, you guys sent me loads, so thank you very much. I'll try and look through as many as I can in this video. I may need to make a part 2. I may have to make this a series. If you have any Poppy Playtime hot takes of your own, leave them in the comments or put them in the Kirbyster Plays community tab, and I will read them all. Thank you also to the amazing Kirbyster Plays channel members Austin, Karina, Maria, Sean and Hannah. You people are amazing, thank you so much for supporting me, you're awesome. And just before we begin, subscribe if you would like to, and I would love it if you did. I'm Kirbyster Plays, how you doing? Supreme! Mob lost all horror vibes after Chapter 3. I disagree with this one. I believe Mob gained a lot of their horror vibes during Chapter 3 and found ways of refining them. Chapter 3 was a big change for the franchise. In my mind, I've kind of separated Chapter 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5 as like their own trilogy. Chapter 3 was a big transformation. Obviously there was a giant gap between Chapter 3 and Chapter 2. Chapter 3 was a graphical overhaul, the locations got much darker physically, and the story got much darker with it. Chapter 3 was Mob mobilising the franchise a lot more and separating it from the things that make it kind of like a broader mascot horror, and part of evolving the franchise in the way that they did was appealing to many different types of horror. Chapter 3 I think has silently become a fan favourite because it had like a much broader horror appeal. Even if you just compare Chapter 3 to Chapter 1 and 2, it does just appear more horrific in its presentation. So I'm going to disagree with you on this one. I feel like a lot of the horror vibes came out during Chapter 3, and then after that, yeah, maybe it got a bit lost, but elements of horror and the lore that was expanded on beginning with Chapter 3, that's always going to be just as horrific. So I feel like, yeah, it kind of, the scariness of Poppy is a bit of a roller coaster, but Chapter 3 was definitely like a bit of a catalyst, and it's just kept going from there. If you want to reply to any of the opinions in this video, then leave a comment for sure. Chapter 5 was better than Chapter 3. Okay, so, in spite of everything I just said, this is like my most unpopular opinion of all time. I didn't like Chapter 3 very much. I know, listen, hey, I love Catnap as a character, and there are a lot of really good things about Chapter 3. Like I said, the graphics were fantastic, some of the locations were very iconic, there were a lot more characters introduced and things like that. I do love the franchise, and obviously that includes all of its installments, but I think if I ranked all of the chapters, Chapter 3 would be last. That's just because I found the game to be much more confusing. I had to dig deeper to find out the lore, like even about Catnap. It wasn't until I got like the orientation handbook and just other little things like that and watching theory videos that I came to properly understand it, despite having played it all the way through myself, you know? Does that make the game bad? Absolutely not. It just didn't appeal to me as much as the chapters that came before or after it. I can appreciate, like I said, that Chapter 3 is a bit of a fan favourite, because I can see why. You know, I'm not blind to the fact that a lot of people like it, hence the term unpopular opinion. And just because of everything I've said, by default, Chapter 5, in my opinion, is just better than Chapter 3. I agree with this one, Finn. Chapter 4 isn't that bad. Brew, I think that's the same as the next one as well. Yeah, Chapter 4 is overhated. I agree with this one. I do. I feel like a lot of things happened when Chapter 4 came out that changed and altered the way that people would have otherwise thought of it. Just things from the obvious, like, graphical issues and, you know, the story perhaps being a bit underwhelming. The Doctor fight, I know, was quite a big one. Pretty much everyone was let down. It subverted my expectations as well, I will admit that. Chapter 4 does have a lot of things going for it, though. You know? Least of all Yarnaby, in my opinion, obviously. Love them to death, they are cute as hell. You could tell that Mob didn't just want Chapter 4 to be another game. There are little elements of variety, like the game not ending with a chase sequence but a boss fight. You know, little things like that. And the more you think about Chapter 4, I promise you, the more little examples of variety there actually are. I agree with this one. You know, I can't sing Chapter 4's praises all day, but it was good. Huggy Wuggy isn't scary and quite frankly never was. Ooh, This is an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people find Huggy as a character scary. I think in the beginning, in chapter 1, they definitely did. I mean, that chapter 1 chase sequence, that is insane. That scared so many people. And then when Huggy came back in chapter 5, no one really cared. I loved that Huggy was back. Don't get me wrong, don't put me in that camp. I loved that Huggy was back. It just didn't scare anyone. So I wouldn't agree that Huggy was never scary, because when chapter 1 came out, obviously they were. But I would say now, I think they've kind of been lessened. But they look really cool, they are like my third favourite villain. There's a lot to love about them. Scare factor? Depends who you ask. I have a few. Okay, we'll have a lightning round for Cosmic Shadow. Poppy is overhated like hell, and the community often blames her for things that aren't her fault. While she was a very poor leader, people hate on Poppy for being flawed and having human reactions despite everything she's gone through. Perhaps I'm too empathetic of a person, but I don't see most of the hate towards her. In my experience, I've never heard anyone say that Poppy is downright their least favourite character. I just feel like, especially in the early chapters, she just needed more to do. You know, personally, I don't have an opinion on Poppy as a character. You know, I don't love them, I don't like them, I don't dislike them, I don't hate them. You know, they're just kind of there. Their importance in the lore was kind of always established, and after that, they were a bit of a leader, they gave us a bit of direction, and that's about it. But this particular opinion is about the hate. And I don't think people downright hate Poppy, so I'm going to say I partly agree with this one. 2. Mummy Longlegs is extremely underrated. She was such a cool character, had an amazing voice, had a fun and unique personality, had really cool abilities, and an intriguing backstory that most characters don't really get. I wish the fandom would talk about her more, and I wish Mob would use her more. I don't know how Mob could use her now, but I will agree. My top favourite voice in the franchise is probably Mummy Longlegs. The voice of the prototype is amazing, but that's by multiple people. In terms of a performance by one person, Mummy Longlegs is so powerful. It's really good, I do agree. You know, when chapter 1 came out, a lot of people forget just how big Poppy Playtime was, and following up that chapter 1 was almost an impossible task. And Mummy Longlegs was able to do that. She's uncanny, she's like a weird, cold, calculated villain, almost the complete opposite of Huggy, that's like an untrained animal. I agree with this one. When there were only chapter 1 and 2, a lot of people loved Mummy Longlegs, and they were their favourite over Huggy. So although I would say yes, they're underrated now, in the past they weren't, but these days they are. Number 3, I think gatekeeping the player's identity is the final mystery to find out in the last chapter is actually good and helps keep suspense regarding one last major mystery in the series. This one is worded almost like it's taken for granted that we will find out what the player character looks like one day. I think we will. You know, there was that introduction that was cut from the game which showed at least the arm of the player character. I feel like Mob is open to showing what the player character looks like. Now more than ever, considering we were dropped in that thing at the end of chapter 5. God knows what we look and act like now. I feel like it's more likely than ever that we will find out what the player character looks like. The reason why they've kept the design secret by now is because it wouldn't add anything to the story, would it? We would just know what we were playing as. Number 4, I think it's better that the series is ending on 6 chapters rather than 5. Ooh, this is an interesting one. There was too much story left at the end of 4 to have it conclude in 5, and the prototype was built up as the ultimate threat, which would go to waste if he was killed in the very chapter he was introduced in. He needed to show what he could do first, then we actually face off against him in the next chapter. Kind of right, however, I feel like chapter 5, if it was like an hour or two longer, it could have kind of tied up the loose ends you're talking about. Obviously now chapter 5 has brought the Doctor back into things, and I feel like the relationship between the Doctor and the prototype can be built on a lot more and will be. However, again, if chapter 5 continued just a little more, we would have learned a lot more about the prototype. I feel like they've been built up enough as a threat for chapter 5 to be their end. We could realistically have been done by now, and it was the original plan to have 5 games, so this is a tough one. I think now we're just at a risk of stringing things on too far. You know, this is the one I want to see comments on most. Would 5 chapters have been enough? Is 6 chapters enough, or are we going to need more than that? Chapter 2 was the best chapter. It had the most fun gameplay, most engaging puzzles, very interesting characters with the mystery element, and that just gives a different feeling I don't think any following chapter has matched. There's definitely a different vibe to it, isn't there? You know, Chapter 2 is probably my favourite as well, 1 and 2. Like I said at the start of the video, I feel like anything Chapter 3 and onwards is a new kind of mascot horror that Mob has kind of pioneered. I definitely think Chapter 1 and 2 were the pinnacle of that kind of mascot horror, and anything after Chapter 3 is kind of like something of Mob's own design. So the vibe in Chapter 2 is different. It's much similar to other mascot horror franchises. I'm comfortable with that. I like that, and that's why Chapter 2 has stayed as my favourite, not to discredit 3, 4 and 5. There's creativity there, there's imagination, and that's much more of like a mascot horror map that Mob is creating for themselves. In terms of gameplay, yeah, Chapter 2 is like linear mascot horror, and I love that to death. I love it, I eat that stuff up. On a foundational level, this one is just Chapter 2 is best. I kind of agree with that, 1 and 2. I'm a purist, I'm a Poppy purist. Obviously, I enjoy Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 a lot as well. There's a 6, okay. Pianosaurus is overrated. He was a nothing character that was wasted, yes, but people will go on about him and grieve for something that was barely relevant or interesting at all to begin with. The amount of love he receives feels so incredibly forced. His fans don't actually like him, they force themselves to, out of a feeling of obligation to compensate for his lack of screen time. I feel like Mob only ever planned for Pianosaurus to be like a super minor character. It was just so weird. They had their own dedicated trailer before appearing in anything, and then obviously after the fan reaction and backlash at his quick death in Chapter 4, which is another reason why people overhate Chapter 4 itself, Mob then thought, okay, here's a Pianosaurus shirt, here's a Pianosaurus pillow, etc. Mob is clearly trying to build up Pianosaurus, and that will bring in fans. So I don't think Pianosaurus is overrated, I feel like they're just another character that Mob is keen to include. I wouldn't say they were a member of the main band, I think is a way of putting it. I think people have reason to grieve. It's a good word to use, grieve, when it comes to Pianosaurus itself. No, I wouldn't say they were particularly overrated. Okay, we are going to do one more today. I will have to do a part 2 to this. Prismatic, hello. It should have kept the idea of you being a toy in a house like Toy Story. Okay, so this is linking back to Tina Toy Time, which if you didn't know is the beta name for Poppy Playtime. I made a video on it. It's in the Poppy iceberg. Go watch it. Yes, Poppy Playtime was going to be a game where we walk around a house and we're a toy and all of that stuff. I would have been super interested to see where this game goes. I wouldn't have taken it over what we have now though. I feel like the whole house gimmick, it's perfect for a spin-off. When you think of a mascot horror game that takes place in a house, my mind automatically goes to something like Five Nights at Freddy's 4, which is my favourite game of all time, or in that cluster of top 5 or top 10 favourite. So yeah, I would have loved to have seen Poppy in a house get explored more. Maybe it will be. I don't know, there have always been rumours of another Poppy Playtime spin-off that we don't know anything about. It could be this idea revisited. I would love it if it was. I don't think that idea should have been kept though, fully. Mob Entertainment clearly changed it for a reason, and, you know, I'm happy they did. I would also be happy if they didn't, maybe just to a lesser degree. It's an interesting one. Those are all of the hot takes I'm going to go through in this video. There will be a part 2. Thank you again to the amazing Kirbyster Plays channel members, Austin, Karina, Maria, Sean and Hannah. You people are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please subscribe and leave your own Poppy Playtime hot takes in the comments, and I will read them.